Hey, you guys! Alright, sorry, that was stupid. This is Lee, welcome. In 15 minutes or less, I'm going to try to give you the basics of Cinema 4D, if it's possible. Okay, I'm using Studio Release 12, and this is the interface. This is your viewport. If you press use your key use your shortcuts. By the way, if you press F5, you can switch to see them all, and I think that's how it starts. If you press F1, it goes to the first one, which is perspective, top, right, and then front. That's F1 through F5 to switch between all these. You start off in the perspective or whatever, and here's the tools you use to move, zoom, rotate, and switch back to whatever different view. I like to use shortcut keys, like you hold Alt and you could rotate, you scroll with your mouse wheel, or you hold 2 and you move and it zooms. You hold 1 and it moves. The key 1. Now you could find out more about this later, just searching for it. Edit. Preferences. Here are all your preferences. The one big preference I like to tell people is make sure you have whatever texture directories you have in here. You can auto save and you can do a bunch more. You could make a lighter or darker. I like it darker. I like everything darker. It's easier on the eyes. Now if you wanted to change your interface, you can go to Window, Layout, Command Manager, and you have every single command this program has, and you could drag them anywhere you want. Whatever it is, search, find, it's all there. If you want to know the shortcut key to anything, point at it and look at the bottom right here. It shows it. This right here is the model tool, object access tool, point tool, edge tool, polygon tool, so forth, and I'm going to teach you a little bit about that. First, this is your render settings. Say you have a few things laid out in your scene. If you press this, it renders it in the viewport. If you press this, it renders to the picture viewer. And if you press this, it gives you your settings. General, you want to do a full render, or do you want to do a software preview, or a hardware preview that actually render not in here, but it'll render it like that, like it looks when you're looking at it, or Cineman or V-Ray or whatever different rendering engines you would use. Output, this is the output you're going to use it to, the resolution, how many frames a second, the frame rate, it's usually 29.97 for video, or 24 or 30, that's the norm, or 60, whatever. Those are the norms. You could change your aspect ratio, and you could tell it how many frames you want to render, just the current frame or all frames. That's for if you do an animation or manual and so forth. Save, what format and where do you want to save it. Alpha channels, the depth. Then you have multi-passes. If you want to do multiple passes of, say, different textures and so forth on the stuff, you could do multiple different passes. I could teach you that more. Anti-aliasing is for the edges. If the edges aren't sharp enough, you go best, and I always go best. There's options, and I don't know why it has Cineman anymore. Let's delete that. Options, hardware preview, that all comes up when you add things. And then there's effects. Can never go wrong with ambient occlusion. Really, seriously, it makes the shadows pop a lot more. And then there's a global illumination that, as long as you have a faster computer, it takes a lot more rendering. I'm not going to teach you guys all this. There's even sketch and tune to make cartoon looking stuff. So that's rendering. Here's your timeline, and also if you go to Window, the actual timeline, the real thing, you could click right here and dock that if you wanted to. And that's when you're ready to do some animation. Now we have basic shapes. They're called primitives. You start with a basic shape, and then they're non-destructive things you can edit and move it around. You have the model tool, which allows you to move the model. The access tool, which when you're and when it's not a primitive, you could move the axis. You have points, edges, and polygon, and when it's not a primitive, you could access that. To make this an editable object and not a primitive anymore, meaning non-destructive, you either press this key or C. I press the keyboard shortcuts. Now when you're in polygon mode, you could click a polygon and you could move it around. You could press R to rotate it. You could press T to transform it. Make whatever you want. You could just transform just one part of it at a time. You see I have these access bands right here. They're the little bands, so you could do two axes at once. You get to that by going filter, access band. Or you can get to anything, turn anything off, turn polygons off. Oh my god, it's gone, but it's still there. Turn polygons back on, nulls off, whatever you want in the filter. Display, this is how you display it. You want to have it with lines. When I uncheck it, you see that you could see the lines. If I do that, you can't. You can do wireframes, hidden lines. You could do all kind of different ways of viewing your stuff. You can pick the camera if you don't want it perspective. You want to look at left. You could do that. And then you could edit right there. I don't want to do that either. Now, there's, besides polygon, there's edge mode. Edge mode that you can click an edge and you can move just the edge. Point mode, you could just click and point, move the point. Now the object's axis, meaning it's point for when rotating. When you rotate, only when you're in the model tool, when you rotate something, it rotates on the axis. That's its axis. Now, if you want to move that axis, you just click the object axis tool. Then you can literally just move just the axis and then go back to this tool, and when you rotate it, it rotates on that point. That's the axis point that it, I don't know, hopefully you guys know that. If you come from the background of design, Illustrator, and Photoshop, you should understand a little bit of that. So there are primitives, and these are the same things that I said. If you press E for the move tool, the scale tool, or the rotate tool, this is your history of all the tools you've used. You can pick which axes that you want to be able to manipulate. If you don't want to manipulate Z, then you press it and it won't manipulate Z. It'll only manipulate X or X or Y, whatever, or just Y, or all. So after primitives, which are all these, and then there's nulls and xref I won't get into, there are splines. You can make text with a spline, a text spline. You can make helix splines. You can make insides, flower shapes. They're really nothing. You render it, and I'm pressing Control R, or you could press this. You see nothing until you put a spline into an extrude NURB. Once it's in an extrude NURB, then you see it when you render it. Same thing as if you are to, I'm going to switch to the front view. That's pressing F4. Make a quick something here. Whatever. You can close it by clicking this or clicking the last point. If you don't see this when you go to render it because it's just a spline, but when you go and I'm holding Alt because this is selected, holding Alt, and then it automatically drops it in there. If you don't hold Alt, you just click it, then it boom, it does nothing still. You have to have the spline underneath the extrude NURB. If you have multiple splines, underneath an extrude NURB, let me take one of the splines and move it. See, you have to have the model tool on to move the models around. It only does one unless you click the extrude NURB and change the hierarchy of it. Then it'll do more. And there's a lot more to that. This is the attributes of any given object. These are the objects, just like layers. Here are the material areas. When you double click, you can make a new material. You have all kind of options for a material. You can add reflection, specular. You could put textures in it, and you can go to town, man. You can go to town. Let's do some pinky. Woo! That's hot. Alright, that's not hot. I'm sorry. So there's also hyper NURBs, lathe NURBs, loft NURBs, Bezier NURBs, and sweep NURBs. And I'm not going to go too deep into that, but say you wanted to make a wine glass. You see the lathe NURB? You have the white line is just one side, or the same thing with these. Look at those white lines. So if you had, say, some half a shape right here, so I'm going to switch back into the point mode and start moving these to be more perfect. If you had the lathe NURB, if you had this in a lathe NURB, then it literally, it acts as a lathe. Now you got a wine glass. Pretty big wine glass. That's the type of wine I drink. Oh, I just tried to, no, never mind. Also with sweep NURBs or loft NURBs, it acts somewhat similar, but not exactly. I'm not going to go too deep into that. Unless you really want to know, then you ask me, and I'll make more depth tutorials. Hyper NURBs, if you have something in a hyper NURB, it just rounds it out more. So I'm going to take this cube and make it editable, and then go to polygon mode. And if I turn the hyper NURB off, it shows it as it really is. And I'm going to select that one polygon. Let's put hyper NURB back on. So see, that's what hyper NURBs is doing. It's keeping things round. So if you start messing with stuff like that, it'll keep it round. Let's take one point and start editing that 1 point. It just tries to smooth things out a bit. If you have some low polygon model that is a sharp edge, you could put it in a hypernerve and it makes it a little smoother. Now after that, there are arrays, bools, symmetry, metaballs, instances, all kind of other stuff that I'm not going to go too deep into. Arrays does what it says. You make an object and then put it in an array, and it makes that object multiple. You know, I mean, look at the icons. It kind of tells you. A bool tool is really cool, and a symmetry tool is cool too. Symmetry is like if you want to model a person. You have one eyeball. You put it in a symmetry tool and you move it to the side, it makes two. Say you have I don't know why I have a nose like that. But say you have just certain tools, anything you put in a symmetry object, it makes multiples. Now it's only doing one. If you group, and grouping is called putting it in a null. If you hold Alt and press G, which is also in here, group objects, then whatever's in that null is going to be grouped in there. And as many things as you want to put in there, it'll see. It makes symmetry, and then later on you can take that symmetry and press C or make it editable, and now it's actual things instead of symmetry. That's just one box, that's the other box, and so on and so forth. Alright, then there's also deformers. I love deformers. Deformers deform your objects. Say you have this object right here. Let's see if it deforms primitives. You take a bend and you put it in there. Yeah, it does. So a bend deformer, you put it underneath and it obviously bend deforms it. You make it whatever size you want. You could have it, there's so many settings, and I can't really go deep into this. This is for you to get started. Hopefully you get your feet wet. There's plenty of deformers that do plenty of things, and they're all pretty cool. They're all useful. Sorry, I can't go too deep right now. Ask me, I will later. There are also lights, different kind of lights, cameras, different kind of cameras. There's a stage, which is just like a switcher at a TV studio, or just like your editing program. If you have multiple cameras, you could switch between them using keyframes. By the way, anything that has a circle next to it is keyframeable. Hold control, you could keyframe it. Like right here, it's this big. Or wait, right here it's this big. And then let's go right here and make it this big. And then control click and keyframe it, and that animates it. Let's bring it back down again right here. Control click. So so you see they're animated. I'm going through the timeline. You could use these features to set keyframes too if you wanted, or auto keyframing, so you don't have to set the keyframes every time you change something. It does it. You could put a background, you could put a floor, you could put skies and sun objects. Then there's emitters. Emitters are really cool too. You have an object and you drop it in an emitter, and you make it. Click the emitter and go to attributes, and show object. And when you press play, it starts emitting that object. Make the object smaller, and it's literally emitting it. You can change all the different settings to make the speed faster, to make the rotation a little bit, the variation on the rotation different. So see, it's raining cubes or something. I don't know. There's so many things. And then you could take the actual turbulence and whatnot and move this in here and put it in there. I think you have to put it, I'm not sure, I can't remember. Let's find out for sure. You could take a wind emitter. Let's see, let's turn it around. Sometimes you have to go to the emitter and include the modifiers. Include. See, ooh, it's stopping. It's slowing down. Let's include the turbulence. Sometimes you have to include certain things. So turbulence is helping pull it, and wind is trying to stop it. Like the wind should be slowing it down. Look, ooh, it's getting slow, and it's trying to stay right here. So see, there's all kind of things you could do. Then it gets real deep when you start getting into, let me pause this, MoGraph. MoGraph is really cool, and I'll go deep into that later. Ask me. And then your materials. Have fun. Ask questions if you want to go really deep into this program. Bye.